So like everyone else has a Baby Yoda windowsill in their house, right? Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ash and I'm pretty average. And in today's video, we have our second episode of TaunTaunTalk, the series where I talk about everything Star Wars. In today's video, I'm gonna be talking about my top 5 favorite Clone Wars arcs from Star Wars The Clone Wars. Now, I'm a huge Clone Wars fan. I started watching Clone Wars kind of when it first came out. I would have been in like 6th, 7th grade. So I kind of grew up with the era of the Clone Wars. So it definitely is a special place in my heart. I have an Ahsoka Tano / Fulcrum tattoo, depending on what you want to call it. So I have a lot of opinions about the show. I don't know how popular they're going to be, but we'll see how it goes. I don't really think we need a long intro for this, so let's just get right into it. So in our number 5 spot, we have what I'm gonna call the original Obi-Teen arc, which is the first Mandalore arc with Obi-Wan and Satine from season 2. Now, I adore this arc. I love Obi-Wan and Satine together. They just bring out the sassiness in each other, which I think is so charming. And I just love their little love story, even though it kind of ends quite tragically in many ways. I really love the first time we get to see them together. And something I love about this arc, which I think lends really well to it, is that we get the arc in 3 kind of sections. So we get Obi-Wan and Satine on Mandalore, we get them on, fuck, what's the name of that ship? We get them on the Coronet, and then we get them in Coruscant. And while some of the other arcs later on that I'll talk about all take place in one kind of central location, and I like them because of that, this arc I actually think lends really well to the fact that we get different locations, because we really get to see how Satine and Obi-Wan kind of deal with their relationship in different settings. And I just really love this arc. It's the first time we get introduced to Death Watch, and it's really the first time we get introduced to Mandalore and Mandalorians as a whole, since really before this, the only thing we saw about Mandalore was a little bit about Boba Fett and Jango Fett because of the armor, but we really hadn't seen too much about Mandalore, so it was really cool to kind of see it from the beginning. And this sets up all of the other great episodes that we get about Mandalore, not just in Clone Wars, but also in Rebels. So I just really enjoy this arc a lot. Some of the most iconic lines come from this arc. Obi-Wan, go help your girlfriend. Anakin, she's not my... You know what I mean. Anyways, I really love this arc. I love all these arcs, obviously, that's why I'm making this video. But I just think there's a couple more arcs that I like a little bit more. In the number 4 spot, we have the Umbara arc from season 4. Now, if you watch my first TaunTaunTalk video, I rated Revenge of the Sith a lot lower because I don't really like super depressing episodes, which is going to be really ironic in some of my rankings in this video, because the Umbara arc is very dark and kind of depressing, but I love it so much. I absolutely adore the clones. I love Fives and I love Rex so much. So I love how much they're involved in this, but also just getting to see a lot more of the clones and how they interact. And you really get to see just how different all of the clones' personalities are, which is so fun to see. Now, I know if you're a Clone Wars fan, we all hate Pong Krell. He is by far the worst Jedi. But I just love seeing a little bit of a different spin of how we can already see the darkness that's going to happen in Revenge of the Sith really foreshadowed in this arc. And it just, the whole pacing of all these episodes, and really just, you finally get to see the clones having to mentally deal with disobeying superiors and like what is the war really going on for, and you really start to see them question their beliefs and what they're told and what it means to be a good soldier. So it's just a wonderfully done arc. Even though this arc can be a little bit depressing, I just think it really helps us foreshadow on the rest of the seasons, and it was so different from a lot of the other arcs that we have that I just think it was fantastic and really interesting to watch. So in my number 3rd ranked place, which is what I talked about not liking depressing arcs, is the Siege of Mandalore from season 7, which is also the series finale of the show. Now, obviously the last 2 episodes of this arc play right into the timing of Order 66 and is really depressing. However, I just thought that this arc was a wonderful ending to this show as a whole. It really tied up all of the loose ends with Maul. We finally get to see what happened to Ahsoka and Rex in Order 66, because obviously if you were a big fan of Rebels like I am, you would have seen that Ahsoka and Rex both lived through the Clone Wars, and you also would have seen Rex's little scar on his head from his inhibitor chip being ripped out, and they bring it up in season 2 of Rebels. So we finally get to see what happened to them in Order 66 and how they both survived, which I thought was really cool. And I love how closely we got this arc to line up with Revenge of the Sith, and it just, how perfectly it weaved in was just a fantastic end to the series. It obviously was a very depressing end, but to be completely honest, if you're watching the Clone Wars from the beginning and you were expecting to have a happy ending, I just don't think you've seen the rest of Star Wars, because we obviously all know that Revenge of the Sith was not a happy movie and did not have a happy ending. So there wasn't really much of a way for the Clone Wars to have a happy ending. I would almost say it was a little bittersweet, because at least you knew that Ahsoka and Rex lived and obviously went on to fight in the rebellion. But I think in terms of doing a bittersweet ending, Dave Filoni did not take any stops with ripping our heart out. Anytime I hear that score, the Burying the Dead score from the last minute of this arc and of the series, where they've just buried all the clones and Darth Vader picks up Ahsoka's lightsaber, I sobbed. The first time I saw this episode, I watched it at 6 o'clock in the morning on May 4th, 2020 when it came out. I cried my eyes out, and I cried all day. And I'm not one to really cry about shows, but it was just such a beautiful ending to the show. In my number 2 ranked spot, I have the Citadel Rescue. Now, I don't really hear a ton of people talking about this being one of their favorite arcs, and I obviously have it ranked pretty high in my list, but I really enjoy watching this arc every single time I get to it. I always love banter between Ahsoka and Anakin, and I feel like in this episode this arc, it was a little bit different, because we obviously have seen Ahsoka kind of question Anakin a little bit before, but I feel like in this arc you can really see how protective he's become of her, just because he didn't want her to go on this mission at all, and obviously she ends up breaking his trust and trying to prove a point. And not just prove a point to him, but I feel like also prove a point to herself that she is definitely strong enough and can do this. And while the whole arc is a little dark and a little scary, obviously we think we lose Echo, which, spoiler alert, if you don't watch season 7 of The Bad Batch, Echo obviously lives, gets kidnapped by the Separatists, but that's a whole other thing. But I just find this arc, because it's so high stakes, the first time I watched it, I was such on the edge of my seat waiting to see what was gonna happen next, and I absolutely love getting to see the first introduction of Tarkin in the Clone Wars, because we obviously get to see a lot more of Tarkin in Rebels, and then we also get to see a little bit of him in The Bad Batch, which is kind of a spoiler if you haven't seen The Bad Batch yet. But I just love kind of seeing our introduction to him during the Clone Wars, because I feel like you kind of forget that a lot of the Imperial officers were actually working for the Republic at the time. So it was really interesting to see how his personality working for the Republic actually lended a lot to how he works through the Empire, and how you could almost see why he would have been a good pick for Palpatine to kind of be one of his higher ranked officers later on. And also I feel like you kind of get to see how Anakin ended up being a good pick for Palpatine as well, just because you can see, while Anakin is a Jedi, how many of his views aligned with Tarkin's, and in turn kind of aligned with the Empire. So I just thought the whole arc was really well done. It was really high stakes. It was a little bit darker, but also it was just a thrilling watch from beginning to end. Yeah, and I just really enjoyed it. And before I get to my number 1 top pick, I am going to do one little honorable mention, which is going to be the Bad Batch arc from the beginning of season 7. Now, I will say, the first time I watched season 7, while I liked the Bad Batch and enjoyed the arc, I don't think I was as into the Bad Batch as a lot of people were. We got to see a little bit of their characters, but I don't think I was super emotionally invested in them. And while I think we got to see a little bit of their personalities, I feel like we didn't go really deep enough for me not to not care, but I was like, yeah, there's some cool clones. I was glad that we got to save Echo and see him again. But if you haven't seen The Bad Batch, which has just come out on Disney Plus since May, you need to go watch it, because that show made me love the arc from season 7 so much more. Throughout The Bad Batch show, we get to see so much more of these clones' personality and them just work through the aftermath of Order 66. So now anytime I get to watch the Bad Batch arc from season 7, I almost appreciate it more, because I kind of have a better understanding of these clones' personalities and their wishes and their hopes and desires, that it makes me like the season 7 arc so much more than the first time I watched it. So I still really enjoy the season 7 arc, but if you haven't watched The Bad Batch on Disney Plus, because it's out right now, you need to go watch it. My roommate and I have been obsessed with it. I get so excited on Fridays because I get to find out what happens with the Bad Batch and Little Omega. So yeah, a little bit of an honorable mention just so I can plug in how much I adore the Bad Batch so far. Maybe someday I'll do a ranking of the Bad Batch in the order that I like them. It could be kind of fun. So my number 1 pick for my favorite Clone Wars arc, which I think might be a little controversial because I feel like there's an arc that I don't have in my top 5 that is 100% people's favorites. Because if you thought I was going to say the Mortis arc, I'm sorry that you're going to be disappointed, because my favorite arc is actually the Geonosis arc from season 2. Now, I'm not hating on the Mortis arc. I know a lot of people really love it, and if this was a list of top 10 arcs, the Mortis arc definitely would have been included, but if I'm just talking about my top 5, I just don't think it makes it in there for me. So, going back to my top pick, it is 100% the Geonosis arc. Now, if you had watched my ranking the Star Wars movies in order video, then you would have known that my number 2 pick was Attack of the Clones. And if you had seen that, I don't think that this arc is going to be a huge surprise that I love it, just because Geonosis was such a big part of the ending of Attack of the Clones. I adore this arc. Now, what I said about my top 5 pick about the Obi-Wan arc and how I liked it because it was in 3 different locations, I like the Geonosis arc for the complete opposite reason, because it's all kind of in the same location, aside from the very last episode of the arc with Barriss and Ahsoka fighting the brain invader worms. Adore this arc because 1, I love Geonosis because I love Attack of the Clones, but I just thought that this arc did such a good job of kind of showing the siege of a planet from beginning to end, because we have a couple of those kind of arcs throughout the Clone Wars, but I just enjoyed this one the most. We got a lot of characters that I really enjoy seeing. I love the first episode of the arc with, you kind of get this Anakin and Ahsoka banter with how many droids they've taken out throughout the battle, and you kind of get Kiadi getting in with it at the end. We kind of get to see a little bit more how Ahsoka really cares for Obi-Wan throughout this arc as well, and also just some of the Anakin and Ahsoka banter throughout the first episode cracks me up every time. And I also think that this arc does such a good job of, as I said, in the Citadel rescue arc, where you can really see Anakin starting to get a little attached to Ahsoka. You can also see it a lot in this arc as well, and it really lends well to his kind of descent to the dark side, especially when he's interrogating Poggle at the end of the arc, where Ahsoka needs help fighting off the brain worms, and you can kind of like hear the Imperial March in the end, and it's kind of the first time I think that we see him force choke someone, which was crazy the first time I saw it. I couldn't, like, not that I couldn't believe he did it because, you know, he's Darth Vader, but just to see him do it so early on in the Clone Wars, I was like, oh my goodness, like, I can't believe he's already doing this. And while I can't say I am the biggest fan of Luminara or Barriss, I totally don't mind seeing them in this arc. Obviously, Barriss does our girl Ahsoka dirty in the end of season 5, which is why she leaves the Order. But if we just take it for season 2 Barriss and not season 5 Barriss, I actually really loved seeing the parallels between Ahsoka and Barriss, just because you can see how different the teaching styles were between Luminara and Anakin and how that affected their Padawans later on. Anakin kind of gave Ahsoka a lot more freedom, taught her to kind of bend the rules and to be a lot more quick thinking, and like a better problem solver than Barriss, who's taught by Luminara, who's very strict by the rules. There's a certain way we have to do things, and I feel like Luminara's teaching style really led to Barriss's descent to what she ends up doing and kind of her distrust in the Jedi as a whole. And this is kind of the first time we can see it, and it's almost kind of a great foreshadowing for what happens later on. So yeah, I love this arc. Anytime I just like want to watch one arc, that's the one I always turn on just because it makes me happy and it's just a fun watch. And I like how it's a little bit of a longer arc, just so I have a lot more to watch. So yeah, I think that is it. So those are my top 5 Clone Wars arcs. If there's any other TaunTaunTalk videos you'd like to see, please comment them down below and I can see if I can make them happen. So if you liked me and you liked this video, please subscribe down below, and you can give this video a thumbs up because it really helps out my channel. If you want to see my face anywhere else, you can follow me on Instagram at PrettyAverageAsh, same way it's spelled here. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day and stay happy.